They're like, yeah, 9 to 11. I was like, that's a bit much. Like, why don't we make it like 10 to 11? And they said, well, see, the thing is that you're going to have a Q&A at midnight. I thought, a Q&A at midnight? Like, really? Do you think people want to ask me questions at midnight? What the hell? So I did the show, and then I sold some merch, sold some trinkets and beads to the locals. And then at midnight, I went to this panel to do a Q&A. And it ended at 5:50 a.m. No joke. I told you, my answers do tend to be about half an hour long each. It ended, I just said, because 1 a.m. rolled around and it was over. And I said, somebody had a question. I was like, ask your question. I said, well, it'll just be done when we're finished. Because there's nothing else in the room. At 5:30, I had to say, okay, I have to go to sleep. But we weren't quite finished. I should also probably point out there were 3 bottles of rum and I was sharing. Might make it more obvious why it seems so interesting. Next question. Yes, sir. Yes, in the tie. The question is, I hear you teach stop motion animation. I don't teach clay animation because I never use clay, but I use rubber. I teach rubbermation at the School of Visual Arts. I teach stop motion animation at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. I've been doing it for, drum roll, 18 years. Yes, I have been a college professor professing for 18 years. Hard to believe, but true. I did start when I was 2. Those first years were very difficult. I was like, goo, goo, gaga. Anyway, awful. My son's like, I hear this crap at home all day. You guys think this is bad now? In any case, I do teach there. How do I juggle doing that and being a musician? I'll make it even more difficult. I don't just make music. I write music, obviously, and I make records, and I'm a touring musician. So every week, I'm in a different city, right? If I'm not on a tour where I get in a vehicle and play 20 cities like in a row for 20 nights in a row, I do what are called 1-off, 2-offs, and 3-offs. This is a 1-off. I came here, I'll do this show tonight, and I'll go home tomorrow. Next week, I'm somewhere else. DC. 1-off. Then the week after that, I have MoCA, which is a comic book convention in New York City. Then the week after that, I do New Orleans on Friday, Houston on Saturday. And then the week after that, I'll do somewhere else. But, so I fly to 1 to 2 cities a week. I teach stop motion animation at the School of Visual Arts 2 days a week. It used to be 1 day, but they added a class, so now it's 2 days a week. I write and draw comic books. These days I do mostly toy design, so I do a lot of toy design based, mostly Daddy toys. I make short animated films, and there's other things that I do that I can't remember right now. What's that? The Hot Wheels cars I've made some Daddy Hot Wheels cars that would be sort of connected to the toy design stuff. But yeah, on any given day of the week, when I wake up, I'm either getting on a plane to go perform somewhere, or I'm designing a toy, or I'm working on a short film, or I'm writing, or I'm drawing a comic book, or I'm teaching, or I'm here doing this. How do I juggle it all? I have no idea. I have no idea. I think the answer to that is, I think I have 2 answers to that. One of them is, I don't have anything that even remotely resembles free time. I don't go on vacations. This to me is what I enjoy doing, so this is what I do all the time. Designing toys and writing songs and all of that stuff is what I do for fun. So if I'm awake, I'm working. on something. And if I'm asleep, I'm dreaming about working on something. More often than not, this is sadly true. And then the other reason is that somehow, some way, I think just by doing this stuff so often, I got to a point where I didn't have to do something else to pay the rent, which then gave me more free time to be able to do more of this stuff. So I don't know how I juggle it all. I just wake up and kind of look at what has to be done that day. Like if there's a toy and I want it to be done in time for San Diego Comic-Con and it's got to be in the factory by tonight, that's what I'm doing that day. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how it goes. Yes?
You mentioned that you do stop motion animation. What made you get into animation in the first place?
I got into animation because I wanted to live a fast-paced, well-paid lifestyle in an industry with lots of hot women. That's a joke. Stop motion is tedious, but it's boring. Luckily, it's impossible to make a living at it. I got into stop motion animation because I was a fan of horror movies from as far back as I can remember. So from, honestly, from my youngest memories, I wanted to watch monster movies. And back then I couldn't differentiate between horror, sci-fi, fantasy. If it had a monster in it, it was something I wanted to see. And then as time went on, I started to notice that some of the monsters were guys in rubber suits crushing a little miniature set of Tokyo. And I could tell when it was like a guy with fur glued to his face, or when it was a marionette, or when, like the sailor was fighting an octopus and he was really just kind of like wrestling with a big rubber tentacle. And then I saw a film called Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And there was this skeleton that Sinbad was fighting, and there was this cyclops that his men were fighting, and I could not tell how they were brought to life. And that to me was just pure magic. And so I wanted to find out about how that was done. And I saw Jason and the Argonauts, and I saw a movie called King Kong that was made in 1933. And all of these films had that same magical technique that I just couldn't figure out. So I spent a lot of time at the local deli, like leafing through magazines like Famous Monsters of Filmland, and Starlog, and Fangoria. And none of these magazines were really how-to guides, but they mentioned enough information that I came to know that these creatures were brought to life using stop-motion animation. And they mentioned that they were small, and they were posable, and they were made of rubber, and they were shot one frame at a time using a single-frame camera. And I started to make stop-motion films at home on a Super 8 camera. So basically I saved up like all my birthday money and my holiday money, and I bought a Super 8 camera that had a single frame function. I just started